Well, the government has injected $270 billion into defence, preparing the nation for a post-coronavirus world, and record numbers of early voters have headed out to pre-poll stations ahead of Saturday's by-election in Eden. Manaro joining me now for his Sky News Across Australia debut. Sky News host of Richo and Jones, Graham Richardson. Graham, great to see you tonight. What's your sense on Eden Manaro? Do you believe that... I mean, obviously it'll be a very tight contest. We're not expecting a result on Saturday night. But what's your sense on whether or not Labor can retain it?
I don't think it'll be as close as people are saying, and I think McBain will win comfortably. I don't believe there's any chance of Labor losing it. The only hope that would have been for the Nationals was if Barilaro had resigned as Vice Premier and run in the seat, because he is amazingly popular in the Labor voting town of Queanbeyan. He cuts Labor's vote in half there, so he would have been a danger. No other Liberal is, and McBain will win and win well.
You're pretty confident about that?
Yeah, I am. I might be made to look really stupid in a few hours, but I doubt it. I think she's going to win pretty well. Look, you know, it's a by-election. There should be a swing against the government. And I'm assuming there will be. There's no high-profile candidate from the Liberals to split the vote in Queanbeyan. And, of course, down the coast, where Labor might normally be seen as our weakest, that's where McBain is strongest. So, you know, from every angle, it points to a pretty good Labor win. And if it doesn't turn out that way, then Labor's going to have a very long, hard look at itself, because that would mean real problems, and it would mean that Morrison would be an unbackable favourite next time around.
All right, well, you've been speaking about the Labor Party in Canberra there. What about the Labor Party in Victoria now? Andrews is in a bit of strife, Richo, on a number of fronts. I mean, we saw the branch stacking stuff, which was pretty unedifying last week, but he's now said today that there was clearly a failure on the bungled quarantine aspects associated with trying to contain coronavirus. I mean, for a bloke who went in very hard, Richo, for a bloke who really did impose some pretty strict and stringent regulations, it's now all gone pear-shaped. Do you think it'll affect his ongoing tenure as Premier?
No, you see, I think the fact that he's come out and put his hand up and said, hey, yeah, it was me, I stuffed it up, but don't worry, I'll fix it. I think that that'll cover a lot of the angst that'll be around. It hasn't been his finest hour, let's face it. And at some stage, there had to be a crack in this extraordinary popularity of his. I mean, he's wiped the Liberals out in Melbourne. It's quite extraordinary. They only hold 2 seats in Melbourne. But that having been said, you know what politics is like. A week's a long time, and he's had some strife, but you know, he'll be all right. He'll overcome it. This bloke's an extraordinary politician, the like of which we rarely ever see. I think he's the best one I've seen since Neville ran.
Wow, that's a big rap, Richo. All right, speaking of popularity or popular premiers, Anastacia Poland riding high in the polls here for the way in which she's handled the pandemic in Queensland. She was very resilient, very, very strong on keeping the borders closed until she felt that it was safe. It's now July 10. And I got to say, Richo, in the finest traditions of Queensland premiers, and I'm thinking about Joh Bjelke-Petersen here and Peter Beattie, of course, she had a crack at Morrison yesterday, and a real crack. She took the gloves off and was quite critical of the way in which he'd singled out Queensland. No Queensland leader ever loses ground when they have a crack at Canberra.
No, I mean, it's the South. Those 2 words, I think that they make sure that inside every Queenslander there wells up this feeling of they're coming to get us, but we'll fight them at the border. And she's actually literally done that, fought them at the border, hasn't she?
She has indeed. Do you think she's looking strong for October 31? Because, as I said, her popularity, Graham, has really surged off the back of this. There's been a lot of critics, and I'm one of them. I think she should have gone earlier as far as lifting the borders. But look, the people love her up here, as you know. I mean, you've had lunch with her. I mean, she gets mobbed.
Mate, she won't get beaten. Not until when she leaves that job, it'll be because she's decided it's time. I think Queensland is very keen on keeping her in the job. And as you say, if you walk with her, have lunch with her, it is amazing the rapport she has with ordinary people. Because, you know, she's not above herself, she hasn't got up herself or any of that stuff. She's very down to earth, very approachable, and she's a really nice woman. And that shines through, I think. It's very hard to dislike her.
Yeah, she is authentic. There's no doubt about that, Richo. $270 billion. Big announcement today by the Prime Minister. Of course, you would imagine in response to the heightening tensions that we're experiencing with China, whether it's from a trade perspective or whether it's from a cyber perspective or whether or not they're telling their students not to come here and study because we're racist. I mean, that's a lot of money. Your thoughts?
Well, look, I'm a bit of a fatalist on these things. Doesn't matter how much money we spend. Do we seriously think we'd stop China if they were coming after us? I mean, it's just ridiculous. They've got hundreds of nukes, hundreds of them. They've got rockets that'll carry them all the way to Hobart if they want to. So I don't see any reason to get too excited about this announcement. I know a lot of people will say we've got to do our part, and it's wonderful. But I've got to tell you, Peter, you just look at that ANZUS Treaty and you say, thank God we've got that.
Before we go, Richo, I'm interested in your thoughts on how Morrison's travelling. We see the news polls, which consistently have him among the highest Prime Minister personal popularity polling in recent memory. His lead over Anthony Albanese is very, very significant. He had a hiccup during the bushfires, but I think most people would agree he's handled this COVID crisis pretty well.
Oh, yeah. Look, he did have a hiccup, but everyone's entitled to one of those. Look, you've just got to be honest about these things, even if you're a Labor person like me. He'd have to be absolutely Ajax odds to win the next election. He's got to be 20 to 1 on. I mean, I can't see any way he gets beaten. I know things are close, but I don't detect out in the public any mood for change. You really can feel the mood for change when it's on, but it's not on at the moment, and so I wouldn't be putting my money on my lot to win again for a little while yet.